There's a concept in American jurisprudence when it comes to the First Amendment known as chilling free speech. Now, chilling free speech essentially works under an underlying premise that the government is inherently threatening to human liberty. And because the government is inherently threatening to human liberty, even if they are not threatening direct consequences for freedom of speech, the mere action or restriction or intimidation by government officials or government policy that might chill your ability or your willingness to participate in freedom of speech is on its own a First Amendment violation. You can think of this as excessive permit requirements. You can think of this as free speech zones where they draw you a little bit of a square on a college campus and say, sure, you have your right to freedom of speech as long as it's contained within this 2x2 foot square in the back of the campus where nobody can possibly see you. Now, while some may argue that the concept of chilling is inextricably linked to freedom of speech, I would argue the opposite, that this concept, this idea is so good, so valuable, so inherently true based on the nature of government, it should obviously extend broadly to our other rights, protections, and freedoms. The government shouldn't be able to intimidate you out of your Fourth Amendment rights. They shouldn't be able to intimidate you out of your Fifth Amendment rights. And the same should hold true for the Second Amendment. And what we're going to talk about today is a story. We're going to center it around what went down in the state of California, but then expand it more broadly to other ways that the government tries to punish people for exercising their Second Amendment freedoms without actually going through the process of punishing, a total intimidation campaign. But before we get into that, we are sponsored. The sponsor is coming up, so we're going to throw it over to them, and then we're going to come back here and talk about it on the other side. The hottest temperatures of the year are in fact here, and at this time in particular, with the price of fuel being so high, it's important to be more cautious of your energy uses, which is one of the reasons why I'm happy to report that I'm working with Easy Summer Cool to help you with your cooling needs. This little mini air conditioner is absolutely perfect for me. I put it right by my bed at night, run it, and it blows cool air at me all night long. You just put a little bit of water in the top and it shoots out the cooled, chilled air at you. Now, I'm told by people out there in my audience that this works best in low humidity environments, so definitely keep that in mind when you're going over to easysummercool.com, where you could find a 50% discount for members of my audience. That's easysummercool.com. Cool yourself without breaking the bank. So recently, if you guys are unaware, which I expect all of you to be unaware because 100% of you get 100% of your information directly from me, and I haven't mentioned it before, the Supreme Court struck down restrictions in New York that basically made it impossible for New Yorkers to get concealed weapons permits. Now, technically, this was not a ban, but effectively, these policies were insanely restrictive, required people, citizens, to provide reasons and explanations to the government on why they want to exercise their rights, and this caused politicians on the left side of the aisle to freak out. And when you couple this with the abortion decision, we saw a lot of insane takes from the left wing about how abortion definitely in the Constitution, trust me, there's definitely constitutional precedent and law and written text that talks about how abortion is protected by the Constitution for the first and second trimester, but the Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms, and specifically in this case, the right to bear arms, nowhere to be found in the Constitution. You can't point to a single amendment that addresses people's right to bear arms at all whatsoever. It's not there. It doesn't exist. You must be crazy. Now, most people on the right wing laughed at this. Most sensible people who have ever glanced at the Constitution laughed at this, but this has not tempered the mood of Democrats in targeting your gun rights. A lot of states have been proposing different restrictions, different workarounds, and you've had a lot of stupid takes from a lot of stupid people, including Governor Hochul, who says that the Second Amendment only applies to muskets.
And I'm sorry this dark day has come. That we're supposed to go back to what was in place since 1788 when the Constitution of the United States of America was ratified. And I would like to point out to the Supreme Court justices that the only weapons at the time were muskets. I'm prepared to go back to muskets. I don't think they envision the high-capacity assault weapon magazines intended for battlefields as being covered from it, but I guess we're just going to have to disagree.
Now, Governor Hochul wasn't the only genius to give their 10,000 IQ take when it came to the Second Amendment post this case. President Joe Biden, the most vote-getting man in the history of this country, went out on a limb and told you all how the Second Amendment always had restrictions. For instance, you weren't allowed to buy cannons back at the founding, therefore, the idea that you have the right to bear arms, I don't even know where that phrase appears in the Constitution, doesn't make any sense at all.
We want to crack down on the flow of firearms used to commit violence. That includes taking on and shutting down rogue gun dealers. It's about doing background checks, as well as outright selling, making sure that people who are not allowed to have a gun don't get the gun in the first place. And again, for any of the press listening, this doesn't violate anybody's Second Amendment right. There's no violation of a Second Amendment right. We talk like there's no amendment that's absolute. When the amendment was passed, it didn't say anybody can own a gun and any kind of gun and any kind of weapon. You couldn't buy a cannon when this amendment was passed. And so no reason why you should be able to buy certain assault weapons, but that's another issue.
Now, setting aside that this case was about concealed weapons and carrying weapons, and that people don't typically carry cannons, although I do, I will point out that at the founding of the United States of America, American citizens were in fact allowed to own cannons, and in fact, American citizens to this very day can own cannons. Now, unfortunately, the rest of this video isn't going to be me discussing stupid, although that would be fun, although that's what we all would enjoy. There's actually more serious matters to attend to, because you see, the Democrats never take losing laying down. The Democrats are not interested in court proceedings, they're not interested in constitutional jurisprudence, and they're not interested in your Second Amendment liberties or any of your liberties. So we knew there was going to be a strike back. We knew the strike back would be against gun owners, and while everybody's been paying attention to some lax federal gun control that may be implemented post the shooting in Texas, in reality, we should direct our attention over to the state of California, because they are following a long pattern that we've seen in other gun control states by doxing the holders of weapons in the United States of America, and I think this is incredibly instructive.
The state of California under fire after posting a list of every person with a permit to carry a concealed gun, including their names, addresses, and phone numbers. The list included celebrities, judges, even victims of domestic violence.
That's right. Recently, the state of California, like many other left-wing states, have made a strong commitment to doing alleged academic research related to guns. Now, obviously, when you have a gun control-minded administration and they're funding research, you would think that would come to the conclusions that you would expect. However, whenever we talk about gun control research or gun owner research, typically it is done under the premise that you will not dox the individual citizens that own guns. You might take demographic data or other data, but not attach that to the individuals and put that out into the public. However, California decided they weren't going to do it that way. They decided that on their website, talking about their gun research, they would have a link that linked to every single concealed weapons holder in the state of California. It exposed their names, their addresses, their home phone numbers, and this is an absolute disaster because on this list were celebrities, politicians, victims of domestic violence, and stalking.
Well, this goes way beyond a simple filing error. The AG's office releasing a list of names, birthdays, gender, race, and home addresses of every single person in the state of California with a concealed carry weapons permit. This all happened last night after the AG released a website in the effort to be more transparent when it comes to gun safety. The website had in it firearm safety information, record sales, and a link to a portal of concealed carry permit holders. Except when you clicked on that portal, thousands of columns came up with all of that personal information included that I just mentioned.
Now, to be clear, the state of California says that this was totally a mistake. This was totally an accident. I mean, we just finished talking about the concealed weapons situation at the Supreme Court. This is a national story. The Democrats, which control California, were really angry about it. So coincidentally, accidentally, and totally not intentionally, they decided that they were going to dox on their website about gun research that nobody checked every single concealed weapons holder in the state of California. Now, you would think all this information would be secure. You would think that this would not be widely available and that the state attorney general would likely need a warrant in order to have access to this, but it turns out that's not the case. It turns out whenever you sign up for one of these government lists, any bumbling idiot government official, according to their premise, has access to it. Anybody could just say, whoopsie oopsies, I put out all your information out there. I'm sorry that you have a stalker ex-boyfriend who's thinking about killing you. Now he knows where you are. Now he knows your phone number. Now he could stake out your place. And if you weren't sure if that was the actual name of the person, guess what? Now they got the date of birth and the ethnic makeup and the gender of the person, which, by the way, I find incredibly sexist. I need to see a lot more X's and non-binaries on this list. Wow, wow, wow. I can't believe the state of California, when keeping records for guns, keeps those records really accurately.
Most of my family members do not know that I have a concealed weapons permit. I have a good reason to get it. I got it because my spouse was being stalked by a violent abuser, and we went through a lot of a process to get that many years ago to provide us some peace of mind.
Now, that's just one anecdote of the very many people who are now affected by the CCW permit release, and it's a guy who got a CCW in order to protect his wife from a violent stalker ex who now has the address of him and his wife, the phone numbers, and the fact that he has a gun, and what type of gun, available to this person in case he wants to use it at any point in time to resume his stalking of her, resume his violence against her, and of course, attempt to kill any of these individuals.
It's really terrible that the Attorney General hasn't stood up and apologized to the victims of this release.
Now, even though I mentioned that this was just a mistake by the state of California, totally not intentional, definitely not an intimidation campaign by the Attorney General Bonta has not said anything related to this. No apology, nothing like that. They just took this down after it was up for hours and people could download all the information, figure out where all these celebrities lived, where anybody who has these permits live, maybe plot out their robberies, maybe plot out their targeting of them if they were a past stalker or domestic abuser of them, whatever, but nothing from the Attorney General, because the Attorney General, being concerned about crime and people leaking the private personal details, doxing the citizens of California, who, by the way, are the most law-abiding citizens. In order to get a CCW permit, you have to go through an even stricter background check than you already have to go through to get a gun in any state in this country, and they're just out there in the public. It's totally fine. And the effect that this is supposed to have, the reason why I laugh at the idea that this is unintentional, is to create that chilling effect, to deter people from registering for concealed weapons permits, because the state of California has no interest in private gun ownership. This exact same tactic actually occurs in my state, the state of New York, every single year. You see, most of the states actually protect this information, the names of the individuals related to these permits, from public view, but the state of New York does not. They actually make this vulnerable to Freedom of Information Act requests. So every single year, a leftist rag publishes the names and addresses of all the gun owners in the state of New York, whether they be celebrities, whether they be Fox News anchors like Sean Hannity, just so that they can intimidate them for wanting to own a gun. And they publish what guns they own, where they live, all the same information, and this is done specifically for that purpose. So needless to say, I'm not surprised that the Attorney General or somebody at the Attorney General's office decided to put this up on their website for these exact purposes. And once it's out there, it's out there. People have downloaded it. News agencies like the shady one in the state of New York, their equivalents in California, will also publish this because they don't care about the rights of individuals. And remember, it does not have to be this way. You can't go to the state of California, the state of New York, any of these states, and say, hey, you chose to get a driver's license here, Freedom of Information Act request. I deserve to know absolutely everything about where you live, what kind of car you drive, and all this personal information based solely on the fact that you got a driver's license in the United States. And you might say a gun license is different from a driver's license, and I would agree. Unlike a gun license, a driver's license isn't protected by the Constitution and wouldn't be subject to the same scrutiny of records and intimidation by the state that gun rights would be subject to. But again, intimidating people out of using their Second Amendment rights is always the tactic. It's always what the government does. When they can't outright ban, they think of creative ways to undo your constitutional freedoms. During the Obama administration, which, by the way, everybody who works in the Biden administration, almost everybody, is a carryover from that administration, they started a program called Operation Choke Point. And Choke Point was meant to crack down on illegal activities by using the Justice Department to intimidate banks and payment processors into closing the bank accounts of people doing those questionable activities. But a big component of this was that they weren't actually charging people. They weren't actually going after people based on the fact that they had reasonable suspicion or probable cause that they committed a crime. They were just going up to them and alleging, hey, look, you're going to lose something. Maybe it's your FDIC insurance for your bank not be able to function as a bank in the United States of America if you don't start cracking down on these questionable industries that may have ties to criminal organizations. We're not saying that they do have ties to criminal organizations, but are you willing to bet your FDIC status on the idea that they don't? And as a result of this, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a bunch of porn stars started losing their bank accounts. Now, I know some of you might be saying, Base, I don't like that, whatever, oh my god, adult entertainment, but this same exact thing was happening to federally licensed firearm dealerships. So think about that. These people are licensed by the federal government to sell firearms in the United States of America, yet the same federal government outside of law was intimidating their banks and payment processors in order to make it impossible for them to have bank accounts. And it wasn't just bank accounts for the business, although that was bad enough. It was also bank accounts for individuals that ran these stores. So your local gun dealer, if you go visit him and talk to him about the dark days of the Obama administration, may have been facing threat or may have lost their bank or payment processor based on the fact that they were participating in a legal industry that the Obama administration just didn't like. This is totally unacceptable behavior, and yet the Democratic Party systematically at a state level and at the federal level are consistently trying to undermine your Second Amendment rights outside of law without due process or intimidate you for using them. We cannot stand for this. There needs to be consequences. If the Attorney General's office is going to make the claim that this was just an accidental release, I want to know who decided to upload this information onto this website, and that person needs to be fired. You just doxed a whole bunch of your citizens, a lot of them the most vulnerable citizens in your state, which is why they have concealed weapons permits in the first place. Not to mention, a bunch of these people work security or work other types of jobs where they don't necessarily want their information out there in the public because having it known that they are concealed weapons holders might negatively impact their ability to do those jobs. But hey, maybe you disagree with me. Maybe you're somebody who's so committed to getting rid of the Second Amendment that you're like, burn it down, forget about due process, let me destroy as many of our rights as humanly possible on my quest to undermine this right that I absolutely despise. If that is the case or the opposite, let me know down in the comments below. If you like this video, show me by leaving a like. You can subscribe for more content. You can follow me on all my social medias. You can support me via the support links in the description box of this video. This has been me talking about the state of California releasing all of the documents related to the concealed weapons holders in that state. Till next time.